94.3 The Dude is very grateful to our men and women in uniform. We're proud to recognize local members of our military by turning the spotlight on them right now in our Soldier Salute.
I'm your host, United States Marine Corps veteran Ethan Stitch Gardner, and on today's Soldier Salute, I have member of the Joint Force Headquarters of South Carolina, Captain Joseph Zeek. Captain, thanks so much for being here. Thank you so much for your service. You serve in the United States Army National Guard of South Carolina. Very excited to have you on this week. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your story.
Well, Ethan, thank you. It was a long process, and it didn't culminate until I was 34, actually. I'm originally from just outside Philadelphia, small town. I am a Yankee, but I like to say that I went to war for the state of South Carolina.
That's right.
I served the state of South Carolina now for 11 years. I grew up in a different generation. I wanted to be military. I had the mind. My heroes have always been cowboys, so to speak. I grew up in an era that, now that we look back, I don't see my era listed. I'm not in a named generation. There's this gap. And what I've come up with is, I call friends of mine that feel the same way or in that same group, call us the Reagan generation, or the Reagan era kids.
Doesn't sound like a bad generation to be a part of.
It really is not a bad generation. It is not. The great communicator was president. Children my age, we weren't doing air raid drills underneath our desks, but we saw it on the news. The Russians hated us. We hated the Russians. They could blow us up. We could blow us up. That's what 6-year-old life for me was. Ronald Reagan saved the planet. I graduated high school. The wall came down. That was what drove my love of service, what America is, what America can be. Always had that tug. I had a very protective little Italian mother at home that didn't want her Joey having something happen to him. I got a medical degree. I did nuclear medicine and went about life. Always in the back of my mind, thinking, reading nothing but history and nonfiction and military, loving heroes and World War II vets, and save the planet in essence. So that what fostered what would turn out to, and what is going to be, a lifelong, rest of my life military career of service.
Captain, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your service. You talked earlier about how you were in the Reagan-era generation. Tell me about that time. We're coming out of the Cold War. Reagan's bringing down the wall. He's looked at as saving the world. Tell me about that time.
My perspective may be different, so I can only speak of what I know. And as I got older, I realized I was more fortunate than a lot of people and was thankful for it. Today, when you turn on the news, everybody's telling me that life is awful. It's not awful. When I walk down the streets, it's not awful. There's a reason they call him the great communicator. I don't know. It just felt good to be in that generation. My parents gave up to give me the opportunity to have an education. I had private parochial education because my parents sacrificed. That is the American story. It's not everything being handed out and everything should be free. For me, it was watching my grandmother, who was born in this country, and then her family went back to Italy. Then Mussolini happened, which is another part of why I'm willing to fight to keep the planet as safe as we can. We're not always perfect at it, but my grandmother was 18 years old and was sent back to live with her aunt and uncle in America because things were getting tough in 1939 Italy. She came to this country, didn't speak a lick of English, and made a life, and here I am. This is a little old lady that just set out and had an opportunity to have a family and make the next generation better and the next generation better. My grandmother never got to see her parents again. So there's a story. So some of my story is making life better for the next generation and protecting the planet so people like Mussolini don't happen again.
Captain, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your service. You told me earlier that you were sort of a jack-of-all-trades kind of guy. You've had like 6 different careers in your life. One of the careers that you were telling me about that I was really, really interested in, and I have to hear more about, is you were a card dealer in Vegas. That has got to be really cool. It's got to be some fun stories. Tell me a little bit about it.
You have to think of it as an entertainment industry. It is fun. It's what you put. Any job can become a job. But God, it was just, I can't explain it. It's just smiles. It was fun. It was you playing with people. It's acting. It's being in entertainment. It's basically like being Alex Trebek and Pat Sajak and like having a game show every night at your table and having a party and having a good time. It's not a job for everyone. It's better for a single person. But I got to play a game all day long for my job. My handicap, I was shooting in the 80s again because I was playing golf 3 times a week.
You poor guy.
I know.
So dealing cards on the weekdays, playing golf on the weekends.
No. See, it's a different lifestyle. That's what you would think. No, see, this is what Vegas is. Vegas is you go to work and you work crazy hours. You work like 6 to 4, and then you tee off at 5 o'clock. That's what it is. And then the nights, 8 days that you're not playing golf, you're out playing poker. You go and sit and you earn hours. You just sit. We would sit and play poker, and it's just a different environment. Fun, crazy, and dice is where it's at. I mean, a trained monkey can deal with blackjack. That gets a little bit boring.
So of all the games that you learned how to deal, number one game, like favorite game to be dealing?
Dice, craps.
Really?
In essence, it's interesting because your mind is working. I have a high-functioning brain, basically being a human calculator.
Really?
Because you're performing 1,000 transactions an hour, because every time those dice roll, and the casinos want those dice rolling because that's how they make money.
Right.
So every time those dice roll, you're computing about 25, 30 transactions, and people yelling stuff at you and screaming and throwing this bets. And especially if I'm playing, I'm doing that stuff too, because I'm like, oh, I want this, I want that, I want that. Hey, you. That's my Philly coming out.
Last question. What's the biggest amount of money on one bet that you saw from a person in your career as a card dealer?
I was known as a closer. Like when the nights when I was
You're
dealing.
the reason I'm bad at casinos.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're the reason I'm like a couple grand under at the casinos right now.
But when it comes to blackjack, I just have like, I don't know whether it's my vibe or my energy. I enjoy it. Like I got a little bit of flair. I call it flair. For some reason, you know, you ever see somebody's really hot and then they bring a new dealer in just to change things. I'm the guy that they bring in to shut stuff down, because like I want you to win, because you winning means you're going to tip me. So it was like this like dichotomy, like I couldn't get things to work. There was this guy, this dude was winning so much, he was throwing so much money around. We made like $1,400 that day.
Wow.
So that's how much this dude won, that he had enough to just like, guys throwing 20,000 a hand on blackjack, and nobody can stop him. And then here I come. So
I'm here to make your day worse.
And that was it. So 20,000 a hand was, I just can't comprehend.
Captain, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your service. The way that you entered the Army was a little bit unconventional to people. You did it when you were 34, and it was just one day a switch flipped on that led you to get into the recruiter's office.
I had a series of unfortunate events and just things that were happening in life that I had to take account of and realize, and I just wanted, change isn't the right word. There was just something. I had just gone through a period of time where my wife was very ill. She had a bout with spinal meningitis. Things were happening. It was right around the crash and things weren't going well. And this is also 7 years after 9/11, which had deeply impacted me, and I had almost joined right after 9/11. I just had a family and I had 2 great stepchildren with my wife at the time. The math just didn't work for me to go off and save the planet and join the Army. It was an unaffordability. It just could not happen. So that day, I have some things going on, again, personal, my wife, taking care of my family, and just issues that, as, I don't want to say man, but just as a human being, you want to do for the person that you care about. I had these deeply held thoughts of patriotism. I was reading a book on my lunch breaks, Where Men Win Glory by John Krakauer, about Pat Tillman. I finished the book. I closed it at work. That day on the way home, I said to myself, who am I? What have I done? And I walked in and I joined the Army.
You're saying this guy that had everything gave it all up to go serve. I don't have an excuse.
A good portion of it is that. One of the things that I hold, probably one of the more Hua Bible verses, I believe it's at the Ranger Regiment or Ranger Battalion. And I heard the voice of the Lord say, who will go for us? Whom shall I send? I said, I will go, Lord, send me. So it was a little bit of my faith, a little bit of life and wanting to get back to my country in service.
Captain, thanks so much for being here. Thank you so much for your service. You had a really interesting road getting into the Army. You joined and went to boot camp at 34. Now, young guys going into the military, they can be 17, 18, 19. You came in to boot camp. You had a couple careers already. What was the difference for these kids at boot camp and you being at boot camp, being the same age or maybe even older as the drill sergeants that are in charge of you?
It was interesting, and I think it reflects just the route that my path was going to take in the military, and I was there for a reason. So seeing it from 30,000 foot view, it was humbling when you make a decision that late in life to do. It's about something bigger than yourself. I think the biggest difference that I noticed is, like you said, I was 34. I already knew how to do that. That's what basic training is, being humbled and learning to be part of yourself and start looking left and right, that you don't got it all figured out. It's an interesting thing to see the difference between the phases, who everybody was the first couple of weeks to where you are at the end of 12 weeks. I just had the mental, I'm going to do this anyway. Nothing's stopping me. See mountain, climb it.
You had to have learned a little bit from boot camp. I mean, who doesn't? But did you see a huge change in those kids that you went to boot camp with?
Oh, it was amazing. And again, it was a group of individuals came in to be one. I mean, no, not everybody made it. I never discounted anybody and said, oh, that person shouldn't be or that one's not going to make it. But anybody that wanted it, it's a life lesson. It was fun. It was funny. I mean, one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life happened at basic training. The younger guys that were joining got it in basic. I got it in just my mentoring from others and realizing being selfless. One of my favorite quotes is from Colonel Powell. For the most part, my career was taking care of troops, and that's what I love doing. When troops stop bringing you their problems, they've either realized that you cannot help them or you do not care. Both are correct.
Captain, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your service. You've served in the South Carolina Army National Guard for 11 years. I went to boot camp at Parris Island. We've got Fort Jackson right here. Air Force Base Shaw is here. South Carolina is a huge bed for military installations and operations. Tell me about the seriousness when it comes to South Carolina and the United States military.
South Carolina, all of the bases and everything that you mentioned, all federal active duty bases. We also have the Naval Air Station in Charleston. Being part of the Army National Guard and privy to some things along my career, the assets that we have. And we have McIntyre Joint National Guard Base. We have the 129th Fighter Wing. We have 2 battalions of aviation in South Carolina. I went to war with the Apaches. We have an amazing amount of assets. We have air defense artillery in the upstate that most people consider just on the surface. You would say, okay, South Carolina Army National Guard, air defense artillery. We're actually the United States Army's second, as I don't know whether they call it a battery or army or corps. We are utilized as the Army's second main air defense artillery. We do what's called Operation Noble Eagle. We do all the air defense around Washington. When you get into the nuts and bolts, the amount of moving parts, the capacity that the state of South Carolina has to mobilize. During the flood, we witnessed it. Thank the Lord and all that is holy that we had 2 aviation battalions in South Carolina during the flood, because I don't know if anybody was watching television when they were dropping sandbags. We are blessed with the power and the assets that we have in South Carolina. I've been blessed to be a part of the men and women of the South Carolina Army National Guard. Probably saved me in more ways than one.
It would be a terrible, terrible thing. Hopefully it'll never happen to where another country invaded the United States. But from what you're telling me, it sounds like if anybody ever tried to put boots on ground in South Carolina, they'd have a pretty hard time of it, because we're ready.
There's a reason why things are where they are and why it is a big deal and it is a big mission. We take it very seriously.
Captain, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your service. You are an avid motorcycle enthusiast like myself. Love being on 2 wheels. It's a great stress reliever for our veterans out there. You're the treasurer for the Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association 34-1, Columbia, South Carolina. And you guys do a lot of work in the community for charity, for veterans. Tell me about the organization and some things that you might have coming up that people might want to be aware of.
I'd love to have any opportunity to talk about that and invite anybody to find out information about us. And even if you do not ride a motorcycle, I will teach you how to ride a motorcycle. If you have a DD214, come see me. We'll teach you how to ride a motorcycle. Oddly enough, I'm going to throw a plug out. I do not ride a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. I ride an Indian. Here's the thing. See, that's it. It's passion. We like what we like. We like motorcycles. I'm a motorcycle enthusiast. You're a motorcycle enthusiast. You want to be around a bunch of enthusiasts, or do you want to get enthused by something? You want to be around people that are just going to understand you and get you, because I don't fit in a lot of groups. We all have things that we deal with. We've all taken something. Not all of it's from war. Some of it's personal. It's just a group that, for some reason, it's where I landed. I don't fit in many groups. But we have 2 things in common. We're looking out for each other, and we ride motorcycles because it's the best therapy that there is. They call it wind therapy for a reason. If you are a veteran, you can get the motorcycle safety course from Harley-Davidson. That's how I did mine. When when I got my license back, because I didn't have a motorcycle license for 15 years because, like, I had a rule, you're not allowed to have a motorcycle if your kids are under 18 years old.
Good rule to have.
Right. Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association is a place to be. The only requirements are you have to have a DD-214 that says that you were overseas in a war zone, and you have to ride a motorcycle over 500 cc's. That's it. Just show up with a desire to help vets. Our slogan is Veterans Helping Veterans. We are a 501c. Everything that we do is net zero.
Thanks for joining us in our Soldier Salute, presented by Little Pigs Barbecue, serving Columbia since 1963 with that bodacious buffet. And Palmetto State Armory, American made for life. And Franklin Equipment, rent, buy, rely. And Atkins Law Firm Workers' Comp Attorneys, who you hire matters.